Welcome to the Atlantico podcast, where we talk about the science behind the Atlantico project, the Atlantic Ocean, and the human adventures experienced along the way. Here, we have conversations with guests from around the world who work together so that we can better understand, manage, and protect the ocean. So let's embark on the journey of Atlantico and discover the world that lies above and beneath the surface of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. Welcome back to the Atlantico podcast. Today's episode kickstarts a series which is dedicated to discovering other research and innovation programs that work on advancing the science and technologies which contribute to the advancement of marine sciences and its applications, so that together we can improve our understanding, the management and protection of the oceans. And to open this series, our guest today is Philip James. He is the coordinator of the AquaVitae project, a project funded under the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme. Phil, hi, and welcome to the Atlantico podcast.
Hi, Eloise. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to represent the AquaVitae project and the consortium on the podcast.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to hear about the project, but before we do that, you might not know, but we like to start each episode by getting to know our guests. So could you tell us about your connection to the ocean? How did it start for you? And also, could you maybe take us through your journey that has led you to do what you do today?
Sure. So I live and work in Tromsø now, which is right up in the far north of Norway. But I guess my involvement and the passion for the ocean started in New Zealand, where I grew up. New Zealand is really just two small islands in the huge South Pacific Ocean. So our closest neighbour there is Australia, which is 3,000 kilometres away. So everybody in New Zealand grows up close to the ocean. I think the furthest you can go from the ocean in New Zealand is about 100 kilometres. Then you start going back towards the ocean again. So everybody spends their summer vacations at the beach. I swam as a child. I learned to surf, scuba dive, free dive, spearfish, fish, anything to do with the ocean. I loved doing it. And eventually I decided that I should take that interest into some form of profession and studied marine and plant ecology at the Victoria University of Wellington. And then went on from there and worked 16 years at the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research in New Zealand, working in the aquaculture division there, looking at species like spiny lobsters and sea urchins and lots of interesting novel species in terms of aquaculture, that is, like seahorses and herbivorous fish. And in 2009, I was awarded a 2-year research fellowship to come here to Tromsø in Norway from New Zealand, which of course is, I think, almost actually the polar opposite of New Zealand. So I began working here at NOFIMA, which is the Norwegian Institute of Feed, Fisheries and Aquaculture, in the aquaculture division, production biology department, working initially on snow crabs and king crabs, then moved on to sea urchins and more recently culture of macroalgae. And I've been here 13 years now with the entire family. Still love to play and work in the ocean, still do a little bit of surfing, freediving, fishing when I can. And I've worked in aquaculture now, low-trophic species, both in New Zealand and Norway for almost 30 years. Not sure where all that time has gone, but and that's culminated really in the coordination of this AquaVitae project, which started in 2019, which is hugely exciting and also has been hugely challenging as well, but a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, I can relate to that one for sure. But before we go into more details about the project itself, it would be good to understand more about the context and the specific challenges within which you are working. So could you tell us what the need behind the project is?
I think most people are aware, and in fact the United Nations have actually published data that shows or predicts at least that the world in general will need about 50% more food than we have at this point in time by the year 250. And the reason for that is that we're just a growing population in the world. We have another 2.5 billion people to feed in addition to all the people that we have at this point. And of course, there's going to be a huge number of challenges. Less availability of land, of course, because we're trying to grow more food and there's more people. Freshwater resources, of course, are limited. And we have this changing climate, of course, global warming that we're all, I think, familiar with as well. And the culture of marine species, what people refer to as either aquaculture or mariculture, is the obvious way to complement land-based agriculture and to increase this sort of global supply of nutritious food. But of course, increasing that food availability is one thing, but doing it in a sustainable way, that's the key to our future, of course. So there's been a lot of study on this, a lot of reports written. There's some quite seminal reports by, for example, the European Commission. They wrote a report, I think in 2017, called Food from the Oceans. And they specifically say in there that, in fact, I can quote, by far the biggest potential for increasing seafood production in the foreseeable future is through the farming of marine species, especially those species at lower levels in the ocean food chain. Other reports showing in terms of climate change that if we want to restrict the increase in climate change to 1.5 degrees, there are different ways of doing that, but some of the ways that we can contribute to that is giving incentives for shifting diets towards low-carbon protein like fish, seaweed, for example. Again, creating incentives for low-trophic level aquaculture, again, species like seaweeds. Interesting article in Nature in 2020, they suggest that we could increase the amount of food by 36 to 74%, which is just some percentage, but if you put that in tonnes, it's 21 to 44 million tonne. That's a massive amount of food. And the most likely way to do that is through mariculture. That's the culture of food in the ocean. So that's why the European Commission has funded programs like the Horizon 2020 All Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance flagship, which of course Atlantico is part of that call. The one part of that call is looking at new value chains for aquaculture production. There's two projects in there. One is AquaVitae, one is our sister project, Astral. And AquaVitae is all about unlocking the potential of sustainable, low-trophic aquaculture in the Atlantic Ocean to provide the food that the world's going to need.
Wow. It's a big ambition. And
it's huge, yeah.
Yeah. Big ambition, but we need it. So that's good that you're looking into it. And now that we know more about the issues that exist and that you want to address, can you explain how the AquaVitae project is contributing to addressing these issues? What is your project about and what are you aiming for?
Okay, so it's a big project, so I'll try and keep this sort of as brief as I can. But so AquaVitae and the Horizon 2020 project, 4-year project, funded under the All Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance flagship, and the main aim is to increase sustainable production from low-trophic aquaculture value chains in the Atlantic. And I should say a few words about low-trophic aquaculture.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably familiar from 7th form biology of the energy pyramid that we see, where we have the largest biomass of primary producers. On land, it's things like grass and forests. At sea, it's things like macroalgae. At the base of the pyramid, those primary producers take the energy from the sun, and then as you go up the pyramid, of course, each level gets smaller and smaller. You go to primary consumers like herbivores in the ocean. It could be sea urchins. Also, in primary consumers in the ocean are shellfish and species like that. Then you go up another level to first level carnivores, second level carnivores, and right up to the top of the pyramid, which is apex predators. And the theory is the lower down in that energy pyramid you go and source your food, the more sustainable it is. So if we're looking, if we're eating seaweeds, for instance, it's right down at the primary producers. If we're eating shellfish, they're primary consumers. And as we go up each level, of course, each level only equates to capturing about 10% of the previous level, which is why it's important that we take our food from as low in that pyramid as possible. And then you have extractive species, which are even more sustainable. Seaweeds, for example, can extract nutrients from the ocean when there's excessive nutrients from land runoff, for example. Shellfish can remove particulate matter when you have intensive finfish farming, for example. So it's important also not only that we look at low-trophic species, but extractive species are very good. And then fed species can be made more sustainable as well by developing the feeds, etc., in a sustainable way. So that's what we're doing in AquaVitae. It's a big project. It's got 35 partners, a huge stakeholder platform of around about 170 plus from 16 different countries. I think we speak 15 languages in the consortium. Super interesting to work with all these people. Most of those there's a big cluster in Europe, but we also have a large group of South African partners, Namibian, a large group of Brazilian, and one from USA as well. And they represent research institutes, universities, small, medium businesses, NGOs. And what we're actually looking at, of course, we're looking at value chains, increasing the production from value chains. So we focus on 5 value chains: macroalgae, a value chain called IMTA, which stands for integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. We have an echinoderm value chain, which is things like sea urchins and sea cucumbers, shellfish value chain, and a finfish value chain. And within each of those value chains, we have specific case studies, at least 2. So macroalgae, we have new species and pond culture, for instance, and offshore kelp. IMTA, we have sea-based IMTA, land-based, and pond culture in connection with biofloc aquaculture. Sea urchins and sea cucumbers and the echinoderms, looking at different aspects of mussel cultivation and oyster cultivation in the shellfish value chain. And we've an interesting finfish value chain, mainly focused in Brazil, 2 freshwater species, tembaquay and pariducu. And then we have marine finfish, which is linked. You may ask why marine finfish are in a low-trophic project, but they're linked to the production of aquatic feeds using low-trophic species, which is one of our cross-cutting case studies. And then so the second cross-cutting case study as well is the use of byproducts from low-trophic aquaculture. So things like mussel shell, for instance, what we can do with that as a byproduct. And these activities in these case studies are occurring right across the Atlantic. So they'll often occur, for instance, in Europe and Brazil, or Brazil and South Africa, or South Africa and Europe. But we're looking, of course, at value chains. And as a scientist, we tend to focus a lot on the biology and production, but the value chains are much more than that. So in addition to this sort of hands-on case study work, we have other more cross-cutting areas. We've got new biosensors and IoT platforms. Very, very important defining what these new product characteristics are, and whether consumers have particular attitudes towards them, and what the market potential is of something that's a brand new product in a seafood market. Sustainability is key. We've got the 3 pillars of sustainability. Environmental monitoring, risk assessment is a big part of AquaVitae. Analysing specific value chains for whether or not they're profitable, and looking at other socio-economic aspects like ecosystem services. Do they provide these services? If they do, can we put a value on them? Absolutely crucial. And you have to remember, many of the people we're working with are relatively small companies. They have mortgages and families, so it's crucial that not only are they environmentally sustainable, but the people that are producing these foods need to be able to make a living from it. Policy and governance is crucial for any new species. But we're looking at building competence around employment, education. We've got exchange programs. I'll mention the university level course that we're doing in a moment. And the second big goal, I think, of not just our project, but all the projects in this All Atlantic Call, is building these synergies and collaborations across the Atlantic. We focus mainly on Brazil, South Africa, and Europe, but we include, obviously, other countries around the Atlantic. We have this strong and quite large stakeholder network, which we link to all the other projects, particularly Astral, our sister project. And we're looking to build on the Galway statement, which was this previous north-to-north collaboration, and now we look at the Balham statement, which is north-south across the Atlantic, and contribute wherever we can there.
Yeah, so as you said, a huge project with a big ambition, and you started in June 2019, so we're 3 years down the line. Could I ask you where you're at? Can you maybe share a few results with us?
So we're actually 3.5 years into the project, but we still have 12 months because we had a 6-month extension due to different aspects of the COVID pandemic. So as you say, we have 12 months to go. It's going to be a pretty busy and intense 12 months, but exciting nonetheless. So results, I can give you a few examples. Of course, we have all these new species products that are coming from the case studies. I think we have 71 products and 40 processes that have been introduced to the market and to stakeholders around the Atlantic. And they ranged from new macroalgae species, a raft of new species in IMTA systems, enhanced sea urchin roe is one example that I work with myself, new methods of mussel spat settlement, cultivation of native oyster species at different areas around the Atlantic. I mentioned the freshwater fish in Brazil. And other examples, this byproducts, mussel shells are used in paints as fillers in paints. So some really novel products and uses coming from that. A lot of these are food products. So we just ran a tasting event, for example, in Brest in France earlier this month, where we sent a raft of different low-trophic products, seafood products, and they were cooked by French and Irish chefs who often hadn't seen this product at all before. That was a really interesting event. I mentioned new technologies. We've got an in-situ biomass monitoring sensor developed for mussel cultivation, a sulfite sensor, which is really integral for shrimp cultivation in Brazil. It's just two examples of the technology. And I think one thing that we put much more emphasis on than we anticipated at the beginning of the course is this massive open online course. And that's partially because of COVID. COVID sort of, opened our eyes, I think, to online teaching and education. So we believe it's the first of its kind. It's titled Sustainable Aquaculture for Low-Trophic Species. It's interdisciplinary. It's aimed at the master's level, but it's really applicable across all sort of stakeholders that are interested. It's free. It's open edX platform, self-run, and we're launching it in March next year, 2023. So I'm very excited about that. It covers everything to do with low-trophic aquaculture, from definitions, culture systems, macroalgae, mollusks, echinoderms, IMTA systems, governance, seafood safety, all different aspects, and then looks at what the future of low-trophic aquaculture could be as well. So we're very, very excited about that. We have an information hub for low-trophic aquaculture producers called alternet.info, where people can go and we have a web crawler that goes 24/7 and just pulls all the relevant news items off the net. So it just makes it like a one-stop shop for low-trophic aquacultures. We've worked with policy and governance with the European Commission, delivering policy advice, which is based on recommendations from stakeholders from workshops that we've held throughout the Atlantic. I mentioned consumer acceptance. We just got back the survey that was conducted across 4 Atlantic countries: Spain, USA, Brazil, South Africa. Super interesting on some of the thoughts, consumer thoughts around species like macroalgae, sea urchins, and different IMTA products, what they think about the product, what their willingness to pay for such products is, and interestingly enough, I think, is what's the connection, what's needed in terms of education campaigns. So they've said, for instance, consumers are willing to pay more for environmentally friendly products, but they don't always associate low-trophic aquaculture as an environmentally friendly product. So I think that's given us some really good information on how we can educate or disseminate information to consumers. Finally, there's just creating these collaborative links, students traveling from South Africa to Europe to Brazil, South Africa. I think those young people are the future of aquaculture and food production in the world, and it's crucial that they experience and get to meet other researchers. We do the same for young researchers in our industrial exchange program. Just basic collaborative research on all the sort of areas and species that I've mentioned. One example is NOFIMA. We've tried to work with a large research institute in Brazil for many, many years, but funding's always been an issue. And this is our first real opportunity to go down and work with them on the reproduction of that freshwater species, Tembaquay. And much, much more. There's a lot more to come in the last 12 months, but that's just maybe a sample of some of the things that have come out of AquaVitae over the last 3 years.
That is a lot. You have been really busy, and I'm quite interested to hear about your tasting experience. How was it for you? I'm assuming that you were there and managed to sample everything. Did you get any surprises or?
Actually, I was not there. This is probably one of the first events I was not at. I was disappointed. We're hoping to run a similar event here in Norway, but we managed, well, it was exciting for us nonetheless, because we did send a stakeholder from Tromsø, and we managed to enhance sea urchins and get them to the event alive and fresh, and the feedback was really good from the chefs there. So unfortunately, I wasn't there. I would have loved to have been there, but no, on this occasion, I was not there.
Oh, well, yeah, hopefully the next one will be as successful, and you can tell us about that. So yeah, the project still has a year to run, 12 months. So you've mentioned there is still a lot to happen. So maybe you can tell us about these sort of last activities you have, and then what will come after that.
Because of COVID, of course, many of the outputs and deliverables have been sort of scrunched back towards the back end of the project. So we have a very, very busy 12 months. We have finally we've been able to travel a bit, actually. So we've got a meeting shortly in South Africa, and we have our last annual meeting in Brazil. We're really excited a lot of the travel meetings that we've had, people from Brazil, people from South Africa have had to travel to Europe. So it's very nice to be able to reciprocate that, actually see their facilities, meet more people in those areas. Across all those areas that I've really discussed, we've got deliverables during this last 12 months. So I think one of the most exciting things is going to be the launch of the MOOC. That is in March 2023. We're very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. If possible, we'll put a link in the show notes to. I'm sure it'll be on your website. So.
Yes, it will be, for sure.
At least a link to your website, and then when it comes out, we'll advertise it as well through our channels. For sure, it's a very exciting thing to happen. And in line with that, we'll put some information about how people can get to know more about the project, and maybe you can tell us about how they can also keep up to date with your progress.
Well, they can contact me directly, of course. Very welcome to contact me. We have the project website, which is AquaVitae project oneword.eu. And there's a lot of information on that, of course. We have monthly webinars as well, which I haven't mentioned, but it's called low-trophic life webinars, where young researchers or students come in and present actually the results of their work. I think it's the last Thursday of every month. They can follow us on Twitter. It's at AquaVitae EU, or Instagram, AquaVitae EU as well. We have a biannual newsletter which you can subscribe to on the project website, and they can also join us on LinkedIn at AquaVitae EU if they want to as well.
Brilliant. And of course, I'll put all these links in the show notes. People can access them directly. So Phil, I mean, it has been a challenge to talk about this huge project in such a short amount of time, and well done for everything that you have achieved so far. Good luck for all the deliverables that are still to come, and congratulations on the launch of your massive online course. I'm sure it'll be a great interest to many, many people. Thank you for your time and your insight today on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks to you, Eloise, and to Atlantico, and equally good luck with Atlantico.
Yeah, thank you. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode and look forward to seeing you next time. You can follow the Atlantico project on our website on www.atlantico.eu, and you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All the links and information on the project and on today's episode is in the show notes. Atlantico is a project funded under Horizon 2020, a European Union research and innovation programme.